Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for Ask the Expert in North Texas. I'm Kristen Diaz.
I'm David Rankin. This week, the White House announced it's going to set up new rules for what passengers can expect if they have to deal with flight cancellations that could have been prevented. Right now, we don't expect much, and in some cases, we're on our own if we're stuck at the airport. So what's it really mean? On today's Ask the Expert, we're joined by Casey Carr from Sharon Carr Travel. He is in the KRLD Zoom room. Casey, thanks for the time.
Thanks so much. It's great to be with you.
What are our rights right now?
Right now, it varies by airline, but typically the airline is supposed to reimburse you if you have a flight cancellation or a significant delay. They'll have to reimburse you for the flight cost, but they don't necessarily have to reimburse you for your hotels and meals, and that's a big change with these new policies.
Why was this such an important thing to address for change?
I think it came to a head, especially over the past couple of years and what we experienced in 2021, and especially in 2022, and especially in the summertime of this surge in cancellations and significant delays that caused a lot of chaos, especially last summer. A lot of you listening might remember there was just massive chaos throughout airports. And it wasn't just the United States. Europe was having big problems and lots of problems with luggage and things like that. And a lot of, in fact, the Government Accountability Office found that a lot of these problems were the airlines' fault. So they were at fault, but the consumer was sort of getting stuck with the bill for a lot of these things that were happening. And then there was other things like, there was this monumental meltdown at Southwest Airlines this past December where around 17,000 flights were canceled or delayed. And a lot of those people got stuck holding the bill for not just their flights, although a lot of them were reimbursed eventually by Southwest Airlines. But you have other expenses when things like that happen, in terms of hotel costs or meal costs or different things like that. And so there just haven't been enforcements on things like that. And the truth is, I don't know how to feel about these new policies. Honestly, I like consumer protections. I am a consumer after all. And I think it's important to protect people. But I also am sympathetic to the airlines to an extent. It's the most complex industry that has ever been created. And it is a very difficult industry to operate in. And there are massive expenses and delays constantly, whether they're your fault or not. And I can foresee a lot of consequences down the road for these new policies, whether they're intended or not. This is obviously going to generate a lot of new expenses for airlines. So we'll see how they handle that. It wouldn't surprise me to see them pass those expenses along to the consumer. And then really, how much better off are we? So there are questions like that, but I think that the ideas are in the right place. I think that consumer protections are important. I don't think the airline makes the decision that's best for the consumer. Often, I don't think that they're incentivized to do that.
I saw something where there's just a lack of information. People don't know what their rights are right now, even before these new rules could come into effect. For example, where if you get bumped off of a flight with more than a 2-hour delay, you can be entitled to 4 times what you paid for your one-way ticket, and it has to be in cash, not in airline vouchers. There's a lot of these things that we just don't know.
Yeah, you're right. People don't know about those things, and the industry sort of banks on that in a way that people aren't going to ask questions, or they aren't going to wait in the very long line to get the hotel vouchers that they're entitled to, or different things like that. They make it a little bit more difficult for obvious reasons. So that's a part of it, is helping consumers to be educated about what their rights actually are, what these new policies are going to put in place, and as far as their rights, and making sure that the airlines aren't taking so much advantage of this sort of lack of knowledge on the part of the consumer.
So when would this take effect, and who all benefits? Is this international travelers as well? Is it just U.S. residents, only certain locations, any U.S. based airline? How does that work moving forward?
This, I believe, is going to apply, and we don't have all the data yet. I don't believe that we know a timeline yet for when these policies are going to take effect. But I believe they're going to protect people traveling within the United States. The United States government doesn't have jurisdiction in the European Union, for example, but these policies will actually bring us up and sort of put us in line with what the European Union already does in terms of protections for consumers in those countries who are traveling on those airlines. They have those protections in place and have for some time. So we're really sort of coming out of the Stone Age into the modern age in terms of those things, and they're going to protect anybody who takes a flight, no matter what class of service you're booked in, and no matter where you're going or when within the United States. If your flight is originating in the United States, these policies will protect you.
I'm not sure that you're going to be able to answer this question, but I thought I would ask anyway. How does the United States compare to, say, flight rules and passengers' rights in other countries?
We are behind the curve a little bit, especially in terms of protections. In terms of rules and things like that, we're all very similar. There are governing bodies that put together policies and protocols that typically the whole world falls in line behind. But in terms of protections for consumers, every country is different. Some countries have no protections at all. We do have some protections in this country, but these policies go a step further to protect people, protect the added expenses that happen when flights are canceled and delayed and things like that. And of course, when there are flights delayed, you miss your onward connection, and you might have to get a hotel for the night where you are. Traditionally, travel insurance covered a lot of these things, and I'm sure that's what the airlines are going to argue. But not everybody can afford a travel insurance policy. Not everybody necessarily. It shouldn't be honestly necessary to buy a travel insurance policy every single time you just book a flight. If you're going to see your Nana in Minnesota, you shouldn't have to buy a whole travel insurance policy to be protected for normal things that might occur.
Mm-hmm. Will this be on top of any kind of protections you might already have with, for instance, like a credit card, might have some type of protection, or let's say you do have the travel insurance policy. I mean, does any of that will X out with what the Biden administration is trying to do?
No, it will be these policies will be on top of that. So like if your credit card has a coverage policy or something like that, if it's something like where your credit card is going to cover a hotel for you, I'm not familiar with many credit cards that will do that, but if it were something like that, you can't necessarily claim hotel twice. Sure. So you can't double dip for things like that. But it will be in addition to things like that. And as far as travel insurance is concerned, it will also be in addition to whatever refunds you might get there.
Now, any rules that the White House might put into place or on top of the other ones, there's one area where the airlines cannot be faulted, and that, of course, is dealing with weather. And these new rules won't affect weather delays or weather cancellations.
That's correct. These policies will only apply to cancellations or delays that are within the airline's control. So staffing issues, or I believe this includes mechanical related delays. I tried to do a little bit of research about that, but I haven't seen a whole lot of data. Weather services or act of God is what we call it in the industry. Those things are what you do need travel insurance to cover. And they're out of the control of the airline or anyone involved. And so it's hard to place blame when things like that happen.
What about like unruly passengers that sometimes causes, delays and people having to get off of flights and change planes? Does that have any kind of ruling?
In terms of these new policies? That's a good question, and I don't know, because that seems like it would also be outside the airline's control, and I don't believe that would be covered in this case. But a lot of this remains to be seen, and I imagine that details are going to be released about these new policies as we get closer to their enactment. And they'll probably be revised. I would imagine that the Biden administration is going to work closely with the airlines to determine the best course of action and the best way to dial these things in so that they're fair for the airlines as well as the consumer.
Casey Carr from Sharon Carr Travel on today's Ask the Expert. Thanks so much for the time.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you guys.